Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today to provide a State of the Province report to all of you and through you to the people of Saskatchewan. I'd say the growth plan might be working. Brock Lesnar's here, for example. We had a brief chance to talk prior to the speech, and he spends a bit of time here hunting and familiar with agriculture in the province, and indicated to me that he'd like to move here. And for the record, you're more than welcome. You can pretty much pick any place you want. So a year ago, we released the growth plan for the province at an event in Saskatoon, the State of the Province address there. It had some familiar components, did the growth plan. It had the elements of the growth agenda that we've worked hard to try to implement from 2007. The six main components of that plan: infrastructure investment, dealing with the labor shortage is number two. Number three is ensuring that we have a competitive economy, not just in terms of taxes, but also in terms of our regulations, in terms of the labor legislative environment in the province. The fourth element of the growth plan is international engagement, telling our story in ways that we perhaps haven't done in decades past, in terms of trade missions, in terms of greater support for STEP and other elements of the trade division of the economy and the government. The fifth element of the growth plan was an innovation agenda for Saskatchewan, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on. And finally, and the bedrock, the cornerstone for our growth plan, was fiscal responsibility, balanced budgets, and ensuring that we're living within our means. There's only so much a government can do, frankly, to help encourage growth. I think we can set the right tone. I think we can help create the right atmosphere. I think we can make the requisite investments in infrastructure and in our human resources. But we know that external factors have been at play, external to the government certainly, in terms of the Saskatchewan success story of late. And we know that it's you that create the jobs, create the opportunities here in Saskatchewan that are actually responsible for the province's growth plan. So, how are you doing? Well, you're doing pretty good. Gord touched on the recent population statistics that were reported to all of us and to the country. As of July 1st, there were 1,108,303 people living in Saskatchewan. That means the province of Saskatchewan has grown by more than 100,000 people in just 6 years. It took us 77 years to go from 900,000 to 1 million. And now we've added that many in just the last 6. You might remember a while ago, if you follow politics, that a certain party proposed that we should have a plan around population growth, that we should set a target in our province that we would grow by 100,000 people within 10 years. There were more than a few skeptics about that plan, and folks, full disclosure, this part of the speech is going to be a little bit politically charged, but I think it's vital that we have leadership in this province that has a vision that is worthy of the potential of this province, and we don't forget where we've come from. Some of the typical skepticism expressed about a plan to grow the province by 100,000 in 10 years were found in our universities. At the University of Saskatchewan, there were some economists who published a paper on Saskatchewan's population in 2005 to coincide with the province's centenary. Here's a quote from that document. "Large increases in population for a region such as Saskatchewan are clearly not possible." Not maybe not possible. Clearly not possible, and should not form the basis of public policy. That's what was being said by academic leadership in Saskatchewan. And that was also the attitude of leadership in the province of Saskatchewan. In 2003, in a debate in the legislature recorded in Hansard, a minister of the day said this about the plan to grow the province by 100,000 in 10 years. He said it was, quote, "so over the top, so farcical, that it flies in the face of reality." He went on to say that any plan to grow the population by 100,000 people was, quote, "doomed to fail because reality says that it will fail." Doomed to fail, farcical, over the top, flies in the face of reality. Let's remember what we were talking about at the time. We weren't talking about finding Bigfoot. We were talking about the population simply growing at the national average of about 1% a year. We were talking about Saskatchewan being aspirants to the national average, and that was described as statistically unattainable and farcical. But that view was not held by everybody. I don't think it was held by the people in this room, for example, who were here at the time. There's many who have come since. I think most people thought we could at least be average. I think there was a few out there crazy enough to think maybe we could be above average, maybe actually we could lead the country. Here's an example of that. At about the same time that those U of S professors, economists were making their report known, there was another professor at the University of Regina. He was traveling through rural Saskatchewan, talking to people. He put together an oral history. It's called Voices from Next Year Country. And one of those voices was a man from Balcarres. His voice was defiant. His voice was angry. But his voice was also optimistic. And it was hopeful. Here's what he said. We have as much economic opportunity as the province of Alberta. We just have to have the tax basis and a future plan to grow the province and not shrink it. He said we need, quote, economic opportunities here, a tax scheme that attracts businesses rather than drives them away. And then he goes on to say this, then my son will come back. Then you'll see. Then you'll see. The book didn't identify the people to whom the voices belong. It's too bad. I wish I knew who that man from Balcarres was, because I would like to say to him and to all of you who shared that view, thank you. Thank you for believing in this city's economy. Thank you for believing in the potential of the province of Saskatchewan. Ronald Reagan once said, quote, there are no constraints on the human mind, no walls around the human spirit, no barriers to our progress except those we ourselves erect. Today in Saskatchewan, those barriers to progress have come down. You've torn them down. Those walls around the human spirit have been breached and scaled, and they're crumbling. And in their place, you're building an amazing province. Today, we believe in growth. Today, we are actually planning for growth. Today, growth is informing public policy development and planning in Saskatchewan. That was part of the reason for the growth plan. It was part of the reason for the growth agenda all those years ago and for that population objective. But as for the specific growth plan we want to report on today, remember there were two main principles. One, that government wanted to do what it could do to help you sustain the momentum, to sustain the growth. And secondly, that we would meet the challenges of growth. And we've already noted the population numbers recently, but in terms of that first principle, are we sustaining the growth? Know that with the 1.1 million figure came the most recent quarterly report from Stats Canada on population. Our strongest quarter of population growth was the most recent quarter ever, and it's the strongest ever recorded. Nearly 7,000 more people than in the second quarter of 2013. We have the lowest unemployment rate in Canada. Regina has the lowest unemployment rate amongst the cities. We are on pace to create close to 20,000 jobs this year and shatter the old record of 13,000 set way back in the 70s. And some of the jobs are coming from Alberta, which is nice. I remember when I was in grade 9, getting into the car with my mom and my brother. He was 4 years my senior. He'd got his Class 1A, and it was an opportunity at home, so we were driving him to Medicine Hat. Mom was going to set him up in an apartment and get him some pots and pans and all that good stuff, because the next Monday, my brother was reporting for work at Halliburton at their oilfield service operation in Medicine Hat. My mom and dad, I think, always did believe in the potential of Saskatchewan, but if someone would have told them then that just in a few decades that oil field service operation in Medicine Hat would be moving to Regina, Saskatchewan, they wouldn't have believed it. And now 200 jobs later and the move, we welcome the Halliburton Oilfield Service Centre here to the capital city of Regina. Yeah. There is continued and great promise in agriculture, ladies and gentlemen. We heard about it in our trade mission. I'll get into that in a little bit, but our farmers are finishing up what could be a record harvest. In the growth plan, we said we wanted to boost crop production by 10 million tons by 2020. We're going to get close to that this year, frankly. The Conference Board of Canada recently forecast that Saskatoon and Regina will lead all Canadian cities in economic growth this year. We're seeing record capital investment in the province. And new in Saskatchewan, just next year, we'll commission the world's very first carbon capture system, fully integrated with the commercial power plant at Boundary Dam 3, a centerpiece of our innovation agenda, part of that growth plan. and now garnering attention from around the world. Our resource sector is strong and expanding, notwithstanding certain cycling that's happening even in potash. BHP Billiton is putting another $2.6 billion into the Jansen project. The total amount committed to expanding our potash industry by existing companies and the new ones, K+S and BHP, over $20 billion. Production in the uranium industry is about to get a big boost as well from Cameco's Cigar Lake mine, one of the richest deposits in the world, coming on stream next year. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, some other good news on the uranium front. You may have saw a tweet and a picture I sent out, I think it was yesterday, of the very, very first shipment of Saskatchewan uranium landing at the Shanghai port to be used in the Chinese civilian nuclear program. Up until today, we haven't been able to sell any uranium into the most robust civilian nuclear market in the world. We haven't had a nuclear cooperation agreement. Part of our government's growth plan is to engage externally. We've encouraged the federal government to conclude such a nuclear cooperation agreement, just as Australia has done. And to the credit of the Prime Minister and his government, they've made it a priority, and a big priority. I think the first federal government, frankly, to work on this in a way that they have. And because of that agreement, we're going to move uranium from this province into that market. They think about $3 billion in sales over the next 10 years. And so we see record exports coming from our province. We see Saskatchewan surpassing British Columbia in total exports last year. We see Saskatchewan taking over as the #1 food exports of all the provinces in Canada, and that is also a first. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue to be very much engaged on export development, by the way, as part of the growth plan. I wish all of you could come on the trade missions when we go to Asia especially. That's a big focus for our markets. We'll always need the American trade relationship. We'll always prize it. They'll always be our #1 partner, but we need to diversify. We said that was part of our plan early on, and that's why our trade missions, that's why our funding for STEP, the Trade Export Partnership, is increased so that we can expand and diversify those markets, and Asia is a principal destination for that expansion. In this particular trip, we were in Japan and Singapore and the Philippines. When Saskatchewan goes to Japan, I think we punch above our weight. We're responsible for 50% of their canola seed imports and 80% of their durum imports. We're responsible for 17% of their barley imports. It's all malting barley, so I don't know, 1 in 6 Japanese beer come from the province of Saskatchewan. The list of imports, not from Canada, but just from our province to that market, is huge, and there's interest in expanding it. 75% of their potash needs come from us, and 30% of their uranium needs last year came from Saskatchewan. We need to go to these countries and say thank you, and oh, by the way, what other business maybe can we do? Then we went to the ASEAN region, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. That's here Indonesia's and Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. 6–7% growth in GDP, a growing middle class that wants a more protein-intense diet, that wants the things that we have. And by the way, 30% of all Canadian imports to the ASEAN region are from your Saskatchewan. Same point there. Thank you, and can we do a little bit more business? And in the case of the Philippines, actually, we had a different purpose. We wanted to have a better arrangement to help deal with the labor shortage that we have in the province. And so we concluded an MOU with the Department of Labor in the Philippines. It's unique amongst the provinces. Saskatchewan will now offer our employers the most streamlined process for recruiting workers from the Philippines than any other province in the country. The reason that the Philippine government, by the way, provided that MOU, we're willing to sign that MOU, is because this government signed the most comprehensive protection for foreign workers into law. We passed this legislation. It will be proclaimed very, very soon. And even the Canadian Labour Congress says Saskatchewan has the best protection for foreign workers. That's a big part of the reason why we're able to get that MOU. If you drew a circle that centered on Southeast Asia and included China and Japan, it's a fraction of the world's geographic area, but more than half of the world's population lives inside that circle. We ought to be focused on that circle, and we are going to be focused on it as a part of this government's growth agenda. We're calling on the federal government to be even more aggressive in terms of free trade agreements that would be possible in the ASEAN, first of all, and to continue the work that's already been happening with respect to a Japan-Canada relationship that would include a free trade agreement. So the growth is continuing, in part because of your work, and hopefully in part because of a partnership with the growth plan that we've implemented. What about the second principle of the growth plan we announced last year, the fact that we needed to meet the challenges of growth. How are we doing on that front? We're doing okay. But ladies and gentlemen, quite candidly, we know we need to do a lot better. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege, many of you did, I'm sure, to go to the Ryder Plaza of Honor dinner. Gene Makowski, who's here, was inducted into that august group of Ryder players and volunteers and team management. His friend Jeremy O'Day, fellow lineman and friend Jeremy O'Day, introduced Gene on that evening. And at one point, he noted, when talking about Gene's wonderful wife, Tammy, that Gene had outkicked his coverage on that one. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we may have outkicked our coverage a little bit in terms of our economy, in terms of the need to meet the challenges of infrastructure. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we cover that kick. I don't have to tell anyone in this room that there's a labor shortage going on. It continues in this province. I think there's about 13,000 available jobs on saskjobs.ca. We had a great discussion even before the luncheon about the important needs that are existing right here in Regina for many, many more workers. It's not just an aggravation or lost opportunity for business, ladies and gentlemen, but it is for workers as well. Many of them who are young, many of them who are Aboriginal, they want to be involved in this economy. They want to be engaged. They need the skills in order to do that. That's why developing a skilled workforce is one of the top priorities of the growth plan. And today I'm pleased to announce here at the Regina Chamber Luncheon that in the coming year we will create 1,000 new training seats in the province, new ones, including 300 new apprenticeship seats. It brings the total number of apprenticeship seats in Saskatchewan to more than 66,700. That's an increase of 76% since 2007. Crown corporations will be expanding opportunities for apprentices. They'll be funding more training seats as well. As a government, we will at SIAST and at the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology. There is more to be done, but we're moving in the right direction, and we have some very clear goals that are informing our actions. There'll be another 700 spots added to the adult basic education program in this province. In our growth plan, we articulated a goal to end the wait list for ABE. There just shouldn't be. If someone wants adult basic education in this province, in this economy, we should be able to provide them that education. By the way, 27% of those ABE classes are delivered on reserve. We're not going to have a jurisdictional fight with the feds about this. We don't have time for it. And frankly, there's just an imperative for young Aboriginal people who want to be involved in this Saskatchewan. So we're going on reserve with that effort. Maybe even more important is keeping our skilled workers here in Saskatchewan. The graduate retention plan was referenced in the introduction. We're going to continue with that. There are 40,000 graduates who have enrolled in the graduate retention plan. They can earn up to $20,000 back of their tuition, and they're taking advantage of it. And by the way, that's also public policy based on growth, not on decline. So that's what we're doing to train and retrain young people from the province. It's still not enough. It's why we're not letting up in our campaign to get the federal government to increase the number of nominees under the Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program for our province. We're grateful, by the way, that the federal government in their most recent new allocation of nominees afforded Saskatchewan 27%, 450 of all of the new nominees. We appreciate the fact the federal government has recognized that your province actually has the best settlement record in terms of newcomers. And hats off to our folks that work in immigration in the ministry who have made this possible, and to all of you and to the open door societies that have made this the case, because it's easier then for us to argue with the federal government that we have a growing economy and a great settlement record. Now we need more nominees, and we appreciate this recent allocation and will be working for more. Earlier this year, a new organization called the Saskatchewan Manufacturing Council was formed. If you haven't heard, ladies and gentlemen, it represents manufacturers, not surprisingly, throughout the province. A few weeks ago, the Council approached our government with an innovative proposal to boost productivity, encourage innovation, and address a labor and skills shortage in the manufacturing sector. Today, I'm pleased to announce that our government will partner with the Saskatchewan manufacturers to create the Manufacturing Centre of Excellence for our province. We're going to be working together in the coming months with the goal of having the details of the centre and resources proper for its function announced in next year's budget. In addition to increasing productivity, innovation, and skills training, we also want to ensure that a special focus of this Centre of Excellence is a greater engagement, again, of our Aboriginal community, of Aboriginal people in manufacturing jobs right here in Saskatchewan. Our manufacturing sector is also, I think, an unheralded star, a rock star in our economy. This economy is diversifying. You're doing that. I remember a couple of months ago, the job numbers came out, and when we had a big net gain in jobs created, but when you broke down the numbers, we actually lost jobs in the natural resource sector. But the gains in innovation, manufacturing, and trade far exceeded the loss. It's a diversified economy that we're building. And we've got to continue to invest in manufacturing in our province to make sure that continues. Another huge challenge of growth is keeping up with the increased pressure on the province's infrastructure. A lot has been done, but frankly, here again, we have to do better. We're playing a bit of catch-up because for a long time, public policy was informed by the notion that we weren't going to grow. And now we're going to have to play a little catch-up, and we are. Since 2008, government ministries and crown corporations have invested about $13 billion in infrastructure. That's a 110% increase over the previous 6-year period. In the growth plan, we promised to invest another $2.5 billion over the next 3 years, not including the crowns, and we're on track to achieve that objective. A few weeks ago, we opened the new West Regina overpass at Highway 1 and Pinkie Road. That was a $113 million project. Twinning of Highway 11 from Saskatoon to PA is finishing up. Pre-construction is beginning on other twinning projects, including 8 kilometers of Highway 39 from Estevan to Beanfate. Planning will begin on the potential to twin 6 and 39. We're looking at passing lanes. Minister McMorris is looking at that option as well in very busy places of the province. With respect to education, ladies and gentlemen, since taking office, we built 20 new schools. We've done 23 major school renovations, 900 smaller school capital projects as well, with more needed. And there'll be some announcements soon about that. In terms of health care, new long-term care homes are being built in the province, as well as major hospitals that we've already noted. All of this is great. All of this is not enough. We will be ready for the federal government's new infrastructure program. We've got our money waiting there. We've got Sask Builds ready to go, because as much as we've done together, as much as the municipalities have done, the City of Regina, chief among them, there is so much more we need to do. And ladies and gentlemen, if we are going to try to achieve all of the infrastructure demands of the province within conventional financing, to shun partnerships, to shun innovation, we will simply fail in the task. We will not keep up with the pressures of growth. That's why the P3 referendum in this city was so important. We do have a new Treasury Board crown in Sask Builds. It's going to be our agent to find innovative ways to achieve more and do it more quickly so that we are keeping up with the challenges of growth, and P3s are going to be a part of that, and the work of this mayor and his council and his team and that man right there, John Hopkins, in the Regina Chamber, was not just an effort on behalf of your city, it was an effort on behalf of the province of Saskatchewan that needs to continue to build and use innovative ways to do so. Last year, we also announced as a part of our growth plan that we're going to be engaging Peter McKinnon, the former president of the University of Saskatchewan, to give us some advice on when our debt's completely paid off, how can we put some resource dollars away for the future? Heritage Fund, Futures Fund, a legacy fund, how can we do this best? And he's going to report out here in November, and we'll be able to have a debate in the province and start planning for the very, very long term, for the next generations for Saskatchewan. So that's a bit of an update, ladies and gentlemen, with more to come in the speech from the throne and more to come as well in the coming session of the legislature, I'm sure. Last year when we released the plan for growth, I said then, and I've said every chance I've had since, that growth for its own sake is not our objective. It's not what our government's all about. I don't think it's what you're all about. We know why we want growth. Not very long ago, the Minister of Health, Dustin Duncan, asked for an in-depth review of the state of long-term care in Saskatchewan. He sent the CEOs of the health regions to the facilities themselves, and the report came back. And there's some good news in the report about the level of care that's being provided, and then there's some not very good news about the level of care that must be provided to the residents in long-term care facilities. So he also announced a $10 million sort of emergency immediate fund and some long-term initiatives to deal with the issue. It'll all cost money. And by the end of it, probably quite a bit of money to fix this priority issue. Where does that money come from, ladies and gentlemen? It's additional to the budget we have today, so therefore it must come from growth. And where would we be if the mindset that was planning for decline had prevailed and actually manifested itself, actually came true? How would we afford these quality of life investments? How would we afford to keep lowering taxes or pay off debt or do the things we want for the most vulnerable people if not for growth? That's why, ladies and gentlemen, as long as we have the honor and the privilege to form a government, we're going to be very much about growth. We're going to do what we can as a government to help it continue. We're going to try to meet the challenges of growth together. And we're going to always remember why we want growth in the first place, to build the very best province in the country, the province that we knew it could always be. We're going to do it for all of us. We're especially going to do it for that gentleman in Belcarris. I wonder what he's saying today. Thanks very much.